I have some good news for you. After my rant this morning, Christian was quite generous to me, and he suggested that there's a video piece that we have to show, and he's like, Anurag, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and show it? We'll take it out of Archana's panel, and perhaps you can focus on it. Swachh Bharat Mission, or a lot of work on our sanitation, has been a people's movement. And in our daily lives, we engage with the masses. There are, of course, organizations that directly deal with people, and there are organizations who have an intermediary role to play. Some of us at Dasra decided to just go out on the road and start talking to people and asking them what sanitation means to them and how much do they understand. We pretty much took the conversations to the people, and we thought, let's understand who gives a shit. We're going to quickly have a look at the video, and then I'll introduce the next panel.
वेलकम एंड गुड मॉर्निंग लवली पीपल. वैसे कहने के लिए तो हर कोई गुड मॉर्निंग कहता है, बट एवर वंडर्ड व्हाट मेक्स अ मॉर्निंग रियली गुड? फॉर सम इट्स अ कप ऑफ टी, द मॉर्निंग न्यूज़पेपर, अ जॉग और अ स्टीमिंग कप ऑफ कॉफी. बट फॉर मोस्ट पीपल इट्स potty. That's right, potty. Now that's something everyone does, and everyone flushes too. At least we hope they do. But ever wondered what happens to all that shit that gets flushed down? Where does it all go? Let's hear it from the experts.
All the wastewater which is flushed goes through the sewer network to a centralized sewage treatment plant, which we call as STPs.
So FSTP, it means fecal sludge treatment plant.
You take septage, you take it to a sewage treatment plant, and you treat septage and sewage together.
And then the treated wastewater is let out maybe into open fields or into a canal or a drain or a river or any other water body.
So clearly the experts know what happens to fecal waste. But does the common man know? Everybody seems to know where shit comes from. But do they know or care where it goes? Let's find out. You guys go to the toilet, right?
Yeah.
Yes. आपको क्या लगता है आप जब flush करते हो, where does it all go?
I don't know. We don't know exactly what happens with it, but we would like to know where it goes actually.
I don't know like how it is disposed.
That's a trick question, I think.
Honestly, no idea.
नहीं मालूम नहीं.
गटर में उसके आगे तो हम फाइंड नहीं कर सकते. जो हम नेचुरली देखते हैं वही बता सकते हैं.
नदी किनारे या समुद्र किनारे छोड़ा जाता है.
You know where everything that we flush from a toilet goes?
In the drain. Once it is in drain, then it is it either goes to the main drains and goes to the central purification, or goes to STP, where it is purified there, separated into a solid and a liquid.
And finally we meet a man who knows his shit.
Do you think enough is being done for the treatment and containment of fecal matter?
With the knowledge that we have, I don't think I should be commenting on the kind of thing.
I don't know how to implement it, or I don't know who would do it.
It's kind of gross for me.
How do you help?
ऐसे बिल्डिंग में रहते कि हम लोग को कुछ पता ही नहीं होता है कि आगे क्या होने वाला है. So we can't do anything ना for that.
नहीं उतना काम तो नहीं हो पा रहा इस चीज का.
I don't think so. They are reaching the masses at all.
Should there be awareness about where our shit goes, and would you like to know?
Yeah, they should definitely.
We should know everything about it.
It's about people getting educated.
So that we can take the necessary measures where we can also help the environment.
हमारा डेली रूटीन छोड़कर हम इन चीज़ों के ऊपर ध्यान देके क्या करेंगे? उसका बेनिफिट क्या रहेगा हमें?
It seems when it comes to waste management, nobody, and I mean nobody, really knows their shit.
Again, that was a very rookie attempt. We literally took a camera, went outside, and we thought, let's just try to find out more. Of course, this can be done way better, and of course, there are experts in the room who do engage with audience on an everyday basis. Just for the information, the nice lady in the video was not part of Dasra. Dasra folks were behind the camera. I would now like to invite Archana Vyas from the Gates Foundation, the moderator of the next panel. I would like to solicit some few points on this video with her before we actually begin with the next panel discussion. Archana, please. And again, apologies for the clutter on the stage. We just had to do the setup. Hi, Archana. I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time to get some quick reactions on this, and what did you think about about what we have here to say?
About the video?
Yes. Well, not about the video, but what people have to say in the video.
Well, it's not surprising because till the time I was at Gates Foundation, or I had joined Gates Foundation, I didn't know anything about fecal sludge management. It is highly biological. I don't think that it catches people's imagination. Kudos to our partners who've actually got some policies done around fecal sludge management, but it is a huge communication challenge.
Nice. And you know, there were a few interesting points that came up which we hear every day and now, but there was this one gentleman who like, I really don't know, I don't get to see it, it is an invisible problem, so why should I bother? I mean, that pretty much hammers it down, which we talk about every day, but we haven't been able to crack the code.
Yes, making invisible visible is a challenge because if you think about it from the issues that we deal with, I think to some extent, I don't want to take away the credit and the amount of effort that has gone behind polio eradication. You know, if you see visible problems, it is easy for people to know as to what you're dealing with, right? Even in the case of health, whether it's the problem of diarrhea or whether it is anemia, and now in this case, it's fecal sludge management, which lies beneath. It becomes difficult, right, in terms of how would you bring it to people's imagination, how would you get stakeholders involved, how would you make it a priority across value chain of the audiences that we deal with.
Fantastic. I mean, I walk away with bringing it to people's imagination and the collective consciousness. Thank you so much, Archana. Please have a seat. I would also like to introduce the other panelists for this discussion. Priyanka Dutt from BBC Media Action, Nitin Mantri from AVN Media, and Sameer Pitawala from Cultural Machine. May I request you guys to please come on the stage. We also had R. Balki, who was going to be here in person. Unfortunately, due to a family emergency, he couldn't join us today in person. But he really wanted to be part of the discussion some way or the other. So we're actually going to attempt to have him join us via a video conference. Again, this was very last minute. Apologies if there are any technical glitches, but we're really trying hard to make sure he can actually be with us in some shape and form. With that in mind, Archana, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Is the technology set up for Balki?
Yes. We're setting something up.
Okay, good. Because I think I'm going to leave my technology of the iPad, which doesn't seem to be working at this point in time, or I can't get it up. I'm just going to go back to my notes. Okay. So thanking our panelists, thanking the audiences. This panel is about sound okay, please. I think it's very appropriate. We all have, and thank you for the WASH team. They've set up this panel really early. We've heard that communications is really important. It is one of the problems that we're dealing with. Sound is important, we know. Hopefully, we will learn through the day and during the panel in terms of how much sound, who should be making this sound, who should the sound be targeted towards, how often the sound should be made so that it's coordinated, it's not cacophony, but actually music around FSM. Extremely fortunate to have our panelists. We're trying to get, I don't know, we're trying to get Balki online. He needs no introduction. You have the CV, so I'll just do about a one-line introduction. Balki has created, and I think for me, it's really great to have him on the panel because he's been absolutely fabulous in taking on very complex problems, taking on actually breaking stereotypes. When we say stains are not good, he came forward and created a campaign with Daag Achhe Hain. Or even with cinema, Thank you, Balki. Thank you for joining us. We're not able to hear you. Hang on, let us just get technology in place first.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Balki, I was just doing some introductions for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And you've been absolutely fabulous. You've created some historic communications. When people said stains are not good, you created Daag Achhe Hain. With cinema, you've taken on stereotypes with Chini Kam, with Padman, with Ki and Ka, and you made all this communication not only commercially successful but really entertaining for us. So thank you so much. We also have Priyanka Dutt from BBC Media Action. Thank you, Priyanka, who's got decades of experience working with communities, hard to reach communities, with innovative methods and mobilize them on issues of health and sanitation, which we all care about. We also have with us Sameer Pittalwala from Culture Machine. Culture Machine has about 350 channels, digital channels, networks that present different categories: music, comedy, news, beauty, lifestyle, and you've got millions of followers, which is absolutely interesting when it comes to urban sanitation. We're talking about mobilizing masses. You heard from people from the Vox Pop. It's when it comes to sanitation, when it comes to fecal sludge management, people don't know. And I think digital, especially when you're thinking about creating people's movement, digital can be an interesting platform. We also have with us Nitin Mantri. Thank you, Nitin, for joining us, who's the Group CEO of Avian, which is a public policy and regulatory affairs firm. He's worked across various media advocacy efforts with his various clients and created some extremely successful campaigns. So today, audiences, we do have an interesting mix of panel. We've got the voice of advertising, the voice of entertainment, the voice of cinema in Balki. We've got Priyanka, who has worked extensively, trying to mobilize and being very effective with mobilizing communities, which is something that I find extremely hard. We've got digital communication as well as public affairs. So today we have, and as far as the audiences are concerned, we've got more than 60, as you can see, WASH partners who've been extremely successful when it comes to technical expertise and gaining some policies and gaining momentum around policies when it comes to urban sanitation and fecal sludge management. However, communication tends to be a challenge. We also know that the ambition of these partners, whether it is Swachh Bharat Mission or fecal sludge management implementation, to make it extremely successful and get it to the next level, and for it to achieve scale, communication can play a critical role. It is unified, coordinated, sustained effort of our partners using some of the tools that you use very effectively across other platforms, projects, with working across clients, and we hope to gain from your experiences today. I know that we will perhaps not get a solution, a ready-made solution. We would love to get a ready-made solution from all of you on fecal sludge management and making this complex issue more palatable for our key stakeholders, but I think we will attempt to get and gain from your experiences. So I would start with asking each one of you, because we are dealing with challenging situation here, I'm going to ask each one of you to speak for about 3 to 4 minutes or 5 minutes, talking about one of the challenging projects that you would have worked on, and what was the magic sauce there, or how did you overcome that challenge when it comes to the project. I'm not talking about your personal problems, but really a project that was challenging when it came to communicating with the audiences, and how did you turn it around? So Balki, we'll start with you. We can't hear you, Balki.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'll share with you one of the examples, a brand example, rather than a social example. It's actually a social example, but it's a brand example on IDEA. Actually, when we first kind of started doing IDEA, we're doing a lot of things. It was very similar to some of the causes that we see today. there were already people who were kind of, familiar with mobile phones. It was not that they didn't know what it was supposed to do, but it was a stage where it was to increase the penetration of mobiles and cellular technology across villages, across a lot of people. And it was not about saying that, hey, you can connect to this person, that person, this person. I mean, a lot of people were doing that. There was a lot of information going out to people about the advantages of using a mobile phone. And it was in the early, I think it was 2002, if I'm not mistaken, this one. So what we did was we just took a simple thing of the fact that people needed to own a mobile phone, and they would find out the advantages. And the way we communicated to them about why they needed to use a mobile phone was actually telling them, you have a name now, have a number. And we used a kind of a caste war example. There's so many castes in so many villages, they keep having fights. And we just said that, hey, if you don't have names and if you just had numbers, imagine what a beautiful world this would be. Nobody would know which caste you belong to, and there would be no fights. And it sparked off something in their heads about, hey, a number for myself. Everybody has their own personal number. It was not told to them that way. It was not told to them linearly. It was told to them in one of their issues they were having. A mobile phone found an entry into an issue completely unrelated and sparked off their imagination. They then found out everything else about it because they had a lot of information. They didn't want all that information. They just needed an imaginative way. They needed something to spark their imagination of why to use a mobile phone. So that was one of the first examples that kind of, struck me as something very mass, as something which is going to spread a lot, and nothing can be massier than cell phones,
Thanks, Balki. So this is about people's need for an identity beyond their own caste system, right? So you played on that emotion and that inherent need for people to be known by something that's unique to them.
Not only identity, it's just the question of an imaginative way of saying, if you didn't have a name and just had a number, nobody would think of you as a lower caste and a higher caste. So the number suddenly became a very attractive proposition. And having a phone then became an attractive proposition, of course, which came with its own advantages. But the thing that struck their imagination was not the advantage of a mobile phone, was the thought of a number.
And it's also about breaking clutter, right? Because
most importantly, it was that because so many people are talking so many things about cell phones. Here comes a caste war film on a cell phone, and everybody kind of sprung up and took notice. I think the first thing in advertising or communication, any kind of communication, is to be noticed first. Is to figure out how do you make people see it, and then worry about what they're kind of seeing. It's first how do you make people see.
Thank you, Balki. Now I'm going to pass on to Priyanka.
Thanks, Archana. And Balki, thanks for setting this, what I'm going to say, up beautifully, because very often, and particularly I think with FSM, we're dealing with trying to figure out how to crack that magic sauce about how do you get people to actually pay attention? How do you bring eyeballs to the table? How do you get people involved in that conversation? How do you get people to engage with something that's so hidden? And what I'd like to talk about is some work that we've done on a very different and yet similar in many ways because it's completely hidden as well, project, which is really looking at how young people, how adolescents in India engage with gender and gender realities, and how gender kind of really shapes their identities, shapes their agency, shapes their autonomy, shapes their relationships, shapes pretty much everything. And where does that come from? And a lot of it was actually going back to mining for insights, really starting with putting that young adolescent girl, that young adolescent boy at the heart of this whole conversation, putting the audience at the center, and thinking really about what is it that drives that young person, what is it that's helping him or her make decisions, what's preventing them from living life the way they want to. And that insight mining process, that putting the audience at the heart, was absolutely fundamental, because that insight, and let me tell you what the insight was for this project, it was the idea, we borrowed this term from Santosh Desai, but the idea of a force field. All of us in India who are used to, or who know about the Ramayana, know about the Lakshman Rekha, know about the story about Sita being put in a house or in a hut and being told that she couldn't cross a line if she wanted to be protected. It's the same idea that young people in India grapple with constantly. They're put within a line that is created by parents, by teachers, by friends, by peers. And it's that sense of the Lakshman Rekha, the sense of that force field, that either constrains them or brands them as bigda hua or bigdi hui if they cross that line. So that idea of the force field was something that we took across multiple platforms, because that's the other really important thing, is to create surround sound. How do you make sure that young people, their parents, their teachers, society around them is really kind of engaging with the same idea, presented in many different ways, because obviously you're tailoring your content or your communication to different audiences. But it's that idea of a transmedianess. This is an academic word from the world of development communication. But it's the idea of taking a single insight, of taking certain characters that go across multiple platforms. So they could go across television, across radio, across mobile phones, across interpersonal communication that is completely low-tech. It could go across social media. It could go across pretty much everything. And that sense of, I think we've lost Balki, but that sense of, surround sound, repeating things, making it accessible, and helping people sort of engage with whatever you're trying to do across multiple platforms is really sort of fundamental, I think, to kind of changing that conversation.
Thank you, Priyanka. And so you make really very valid point. One is put consumer at the core, right? Because you have to start with the consumer. Very many times communication fails because we think it's a good idea, not necessarily it is an idea that works for the consumer. And insight mining, understanding what's the big idea that you go with, and then replicating that consistently across medium would be it is an important tip. Samir.
I think earlier this year we did something on with SIF, which was for this. We did a documentary called Amoli, which is called The Priceless One. And it really started with sort of a lengthy brief from SIF, which was about the size of the child sex prostitution industry in India. And the estimates vary from $7 billion to $20 billion. And the fact that it is an incredibly profitable industry causes it to perpetuate even more. So the brief was to basically, choke the demand. The problem with that whole with the whole sort of enchilada of the way child sex prostitution works is, if you choke the demand from the consumers, the supply also gets choked. But choking the demand is, obviously easier said than done. And the job really was to get the millennial audiences to care about this, because it's a huge industry. And I think when we looked at the research, it was quite clear that it's not what people popularly perceive it to be, that it's the wage worker who indulges in it. It's people like you and me that indulge in it, and it's also urban phenomena. So being able to actually articulate that to what is essentially an attention deficit audience. This audience is trained on their Facebook feeds, it's trained on their YouTube feeds. So, taking a heavy subject like that and getting people to actually watch it, also being able to distill your communication down to one or two things that matter, because this is a huge subject. We are researching hundreds of pages about how big this is and how deep it goes. Being able to kind of bring it down to something that people want to watch in a world that you're competing with the next movie trailer being released on Facebook, and you're competing with pretty much every other distraction where people are spending not more than 5 to 10 minutes. And like a popular statistic which is there is that on average people scroll the length of the Statue of Liberty on their Facebook feeds in a given day. Wow. So that's the sheer size of amount of your scroll length at the speed that you go through. And when you're going through that kind of information overflow, getting something to put its head out and actually impact you and get you to be involved with it was a huge challenge. So what we did was we kind of took the entire sort of subject and, plus this communication was fully on digital. And we sort of wrote out what we wanted to be as a brief, which was around Save Every Amoli. So we went with the approach of actually looking at this as an online film release, and we use the strength of our network. We have, close to about 1 billion views a month that we do. So we took Tamil, Telugu, and also, what Hisham and team at SIF wanted was they wanted it to be something which was national. So it wasn't supposed to just be Hindi, and it was also something that we wanted to be tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns, because with Geo we knew that the audiences would, now this was a whole new audience which had got access to the internet. This spoke in regional languages. This wasn't the English internet alone. So we actually took all our major media brands which had a huge community amongst each one of them on digital platforms, and came up with this hashtag of Save Every Amoli. Now, hashtags are easily pandered about. The real point was about how do you actually build a story about one girl so that you can actually have an emotional connection with that. And we took that and built a really well-detailed documentary, and the team did a fabulous job of putting themselves in places which were not exactly very safe. And then sort of polished it until it came down to a 20-25 minute edit, because that was the average length we knew that people who would get involved with the with watching it would actually be there for that length of the film. And then dubbed it in a variety of languages and tied up with a whole network of influencers on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then actually released it like we would, except we released it only online, tied up with Hotstar with the IPL. So it actually released on multiple digital platforms at the same time, including our own YouTube and Facebook channels. And then what we did was, we used the film as the tip of the iceberg. So while the communication was clear about saving every Amoli and getting people emotionally involved with the idea of trying to save this girl from being trafficked, the issue is much larger. And we use the capability, one of the great things about the internet is that you can communicate to different people differently.
Yep.
You don't have to do one mass communication. So while this itself, we splintered the sort of movie into different dubs so that, Tamil audiences, Telugu audiences could watch it in their own language, and Hindi and Marathi, Kannada. We then actually created a whole world of shoulder content around it, which described the sort of jarring statistics, which, how big the industry is, how profitable it is, how many girls get actually embroiled in this, the fact that it's not just limited to girls, it's also young boys. And that allowed people to get more immersed into the universe. So what sort of attracted them was the movie and the snazzy trailers, and then we used the sort of shoulder content around that. And lastly, we obviously sprinkled a whole bunch of celebrity on it, but by getting people who like Vidya Balan, Rajkumar Rao, Nani, Kamal Hassan to come and voice the films. But I think that was like the end, just to push it out, so that we got a lot of press coverage because of that. But I think the good part about it was the co-communication was well done, and we really kind of harnessed the ability to use digital and the fragmented nature of it by fragmenting a creative while keeping the idea and the insight singular.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sameer. I have some follow-up questions, but we'll come to that later. Nitin.
Thank you. So I'll touch on a couple of very quick campaigns. One was around safer roads. Haryana has a Vision Zero for safer roads in Gurugram, and one of the causes, and taking from Priyanka, what said about insight, I think insight is so critical, was of course drunk driving, and within those drunk driving insight, there was an insight that when people are drinking at a bar or a restaurant, your friend or partner rarely can stop you, but a third person can. And in this case, the third person was really the server who was serving your drink. The second insight going down was that, is the server trained? 90%, by the way, there is no training in any course material in institutes, in hospitality institutes in India. There's nothing called excessive drinking. It's just called, you have to serve a drink, basically, right? So we created a program called server training. And we took it to the government. I've forgotten the name of the institute, but it's NCHM, I think, the National College for Hospitality Management in Noida, where we actually imparted training, created a tool, created a course, and imparted training first to the faculty. The faculty, in turn, gave it to the students. Today, that course is recognized that that module is part of the government program. So it's approved for servers now as of last year. So that's being introduced in all hospitality courses as we speak. That was one. So today, we hopefully can see hopefully at some point you'll see less drink driving accidents. The second one is more of a creative thing. I just want to relate it to the theme today, which was more wash. I don't know if anybody of you know that Dettol runs the Banega Swachh India program, the building. So that was more focused on building toilets. And one of the themes we had to tackle was about giving women the right to clean sanitation and hygiene. So we came out with a small innovative thought around Harpick's Matrimonial Campaign. So for some of those who don't, if anybody, if you remember the Matrimonial Campaign by Harpick? No. So what we did was, as
we know Harpick is a toilet cleaner.
Yes, exactly. So the Matrimonial Campaign basically said that because if you're aware, in India, everybody gives an ad, at least in tier 2, tier 3 markets, even Delhi probably, for matrimonials, right? So wanted boy, tall, dark, handsome, whatever, right? So we said, if you write in that ad, wanted a clean access to a clean toilet in the house, Harpick will pay for that ad, right? It was a huge success. And it was I think it was about 100,000 families came forward to add that line in their ad. So it was just a small campaign. If I have time, I can show a quick video on Water for Africa.
Sure.
Yeah, can you play that video, the first one? So this is just a quick, again, it's a 2-minute video about how we can create innovative campaigns around small insights. This is a campaign ran in France around Water for Africa. Small idea about how to raise awareness. So we'll talk more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And these have been fabulous examples in terms of how you've spoken about different audiences, how you've spoken about how insights have to be clear, consistent, rooted in what consumers think and how they need to be amplified across different media. I'm going to pull ourselves a little bit and focus on FSM. Here we're talking about a consumer who is perhaps living in lower socioeconomic section of the society, but still is an urban consumer. Think about somebody who's perhaps a migrant or is a slum dweller, who couldn't care less about how the toilet is built, least completely unaware of how the treatment takes place, but he or she has bigger ambitions in life. They do worry a lot about their family income. They do worry a lot about the education of their children, and they do have aspirations to grow. So I want this panel, to anchor around this consumer. Balki, I'm going to start with you. With this consumer, fecal sludge management, or what we are saying is treatment of fecal sludge, is completely not a known phenomena. We saw that in the video. I don't know, you missed the video. But the fact is that even when it comes to solid waste or the dirt, right, there is a certain degree of apathy that we have. Dirt has become a norm. Now, how do you take something that is norm or something that is not necessarily visible? How do you make it visible? You've through your communication and your expertise, taken on very hard challenges from the social fabric of the Indian society, whether it is about woman not going out to work and man not being at home and looking after the family, or when it comes to addressing complex issues or bringing to life story of Arunachalam when it comes to Padman and so I'm just wondering that when it comes to hard issues, when it comes to difficult issues, and there is a high degree of apathy around issues, how do you make them visible, or how do you bring it to imagination of people?
Yeah, I think, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. See, there is no, I just don't have a solution like that to anything. I need to understand the problem. What exactly do you want him or her to understand? What is the issue? What is the issue at hand? Because sometimes what we tend to do as communicators is we're so overawed by the issue ourselves, and there's so many the graveness of the issue staring at us, and the desire to communicate it all, or make the person, make the consumer feel like we are feeling right now as communicators, it is maybe the wrong thing to do. Maybe it's completely something different, totally different, which has got nothing to do with the graveness of the issue at all. So I don't know exactly what they're doing right now, what's the issue, because I've studied this subject a lot. Like for example, we did a film on the twin pit toilet and how it kind of, for the World Bank, and how it kind of turns into fertilizer after about 6 years, and a per person can use the actual, how do you kind of recycle your waste? We did that. There was a benefit to that particular thing, but I feel there's a lot beyond that. I feel if you're going to ask people to manage waste or to understand how to treat waste, it's a very, very deep thing. I think fundamentally you're actually asking people to do a lot of what the government should be doing, and that is an uphill task in itself. So maybe the problem needs to be articulated a lot more simply. What is it that you really want the person to do? What is the communication really supposed to do? Is it supposed to make the person aware of the dangers of not treating waste? Is the person supposed to kind of look at the benefits of treating waste? Or is the person not supposed to look at anything at all? It's just supposed to kind of paint a wall and something's supposed to happen like that. I don't know what it is. Like for example, in Japan, when I read about it, this whole thing of, like I was telling Krishnan the other day, there was this whole thing of, there's a toilet god. The Japanese are very clean people and very extremely hygienic about their toilet and sanitation, only because it was holy. Once upon a time, the toilet god was actually a deity that everybody worshipped. People would kind of give births in the toilet. It would be seen as very auspicious. So the toilet was seen already as a place that was extremely holy. It was like our puja room, So there are a lot of the issues that you need to deal with, like keep the temple clean, or keep the puja room clean, or keep the waste, treat the waste, where it goes. All that is automatically taken care of because you're already very interested and about the subject, and you treat that point as extremely sacrosanct. But in our country, it is seen as dirty. When you have to engage with a person about something that's been taught to them as dirty right from the beginning, that itself is a mother of a task. On top of it, you're trying to tell the person beyond examine dirt, go into the depths, find out how waste should be treated. You're really asking a hell of a lot of a person to kind of get involved in. So we must understand the psyche of the consumer you're talking to, and I would like an articulation of what I need to communicate. What is it that I really am looking for from this person before I even kind of think of an idea.
You were actually talking to the last question that I had, which is like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? It is so important for even our partners to be articulating that problem, right? So if I've not been able to articulate that problem well for you, imagine, and being from a communication side, imagine if the partners are trying to say, hey, this is the problem that we face. It is really important to have clear communication to be able to talk about the problem really clearly in terms of getting the right answer. So you have actually answered one of my questions. You wanted to say something, Balki?
Yeah, I see, this is a subject that I've kind of worked a lot on. I've done quite a bit of communication on this one. I still have not understood as a communicator. I was trying to tell a person who was going into the fields to kind of do his potty every day morning. It was very far away from his house. He asked me a simple question, and I was in a village actually shooting. He asked me a simple question saying that, you are asking me to shit in my house, and I'm going all the way out there and I'm shitting, and you're telling me this is safer than that. I don't get the logic. Okay, the whole thing of spreading disease, environment, how he brings the disease from there, and this whole thing of it's just way beyond him. We just need to find a simple communication to actually first tell him why he needs to do it in his house. First of all, of course, the safety one really rings for the women, but for the men, it still doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Second, what is this thing of treating waste? First you told him there was a septic tank. Then you told him the septic tank was bad. Then you told him it's a twin pit toilet. Then you told him a twin pit toilet would turn it into a fertilizer. What is it that you want him to do? He doesn't get it. He just believes that somebody please tell me how a toilet has to be built really well, and that should satisfy all the environmental needs. Please do it. Why are you telling me 3,000 things as you discover it? So there is a lot of hurriedness on our part, a lot of things that we want to say. We're trying to communicate to the consumer all at once. And fundamentally, I think the biggest issue is there are so many communications coming at him with so many themes, so many stories. Everybody is doing a social communication on open defecation. Everybody is kind of doing it on toilets, on treatment of waste. There is just too many things happening. He doesn't even know which message to kind of receive. What is the one idea that the country is talking of, except for Swachh Bharat, which encompasses everything about cleanliness in the world? He does not understand any of the message. It's not getting through to him. So my biggest thing is, tell me one behavioral change or one awareness or one kind of thing that a person must do. I'll just give you another small example, like we're talking, like when we did the road safety campaign recently with Akshay. There were a lot of things that we wanted to kind of say. You know, there's so many statistics thrown at us, saying this is dangerous, that's dangerous, this is the guy, this is what people do, this is the prevalence of drunken driving, this is the prevalence of people not caring for traffic, especially in crowded cities and impatient cities. People actually use it as a license to kind of break traffic rules. So we just kind of said a simple thing. It's not about asking a person to change. It's about telling him something that will that echoes what he feels subconsciously when he's making those mistakes. He actually thinks the whole roads belong to him. You know, the road is nobody's property. You know, the road is not, we don't have this social consciousness. We don't have this combined property feel in our country that my house is mine, but the rest of the, outside the road, I really don't know who it belongs to. So it must be belonging to me too, So it's just like, it's my property. Nobody really believes of this thing of a common property to be shared by society. It's something that people don't have. That thought is not there in people's heads. So this thing of Baap ka road hai kya just happened to strike a thought, hey shit, it's not my road. Yeah? It's not only my road. Or it doesn't belong to it's not my property. The thought is there in everybody's head, but we just do it because nobody's told, hey, this is not your father's property. If you were sitting on a wall on a school which was not a public property, and you say, this is not your father's property, get out, you'll get out. But on the road, you wouldn't. So we just took that one little thought and never told people a lot of things except saying, this is not your father's road, please follow the rules. Like that, like in many other issues, everything has a different insight. I'll give you another example about this public service advertising that we did called Balbir Pasha about the use of condoms and AIDS awareness. That point out, we had a lot of things to say. People wanted to say a lot of things, but we never said a lot of things only because we said people always believe it won't happen to me. The biggest insight is it won't happen to me. Now, how do you tackle that? And you tackle that by telling a story of somebody else. People are always interested in something that happens to another person, not to themselves. So, if you want to know what's happening to Balbir Pasha, can I tell you a story about Balbir Pasha? So, it's almost like a serial that's running every day and everybody discussing, will this happen to Balbir Pasha? Will this happen to Balbir Pasha? Then people are interested. Messages go into people's heads in devious ways. But the fundamental insight there was, it doesn't happen to me. The fundamental insight in road safety was, hey, I didn't, for a moment, I keep forgetting that it doesn't belong to me. That's the insight. I want to know a similar insight of what is it that you want to kind of make the person feel when you want to talk to him about treating waste. That is my dilemma always in the communication of anything to do with Swachh Bharat and toilet usage.
Thank you so much, Balki. So you've said very clearly, what is it, so related to people, their ambitions, their goals, their aspirations. Unless it means anything to them, don't expect them to take any action. Because think about us as well as consumers. We've got so many things on our head, and not necessarily we are thinking about waste treatment or fecal sludge treatment. So what is that insight? What is it when it comes to me as a person? What is it that would actually make me take that action, right? So it is absolutely critical. Priyanka, over to you in terms of, especially when I'm thinking about communities, it's hard, right? People, and engaging with communities, moving away from mass media, but actually people, when they stay together, and there is merit, especially when it comes to remote audiences, being in touch with them, because we know that television or mass media would touch them to a certain extent. Tell me a little bit in terms of the barriers, right? Because I find it really hard when you're engaging with communities. What are the barriers, and what do you think are the facilitators as well when it comes to, not necessarily here I'll talk about FSM, but from your experience, what is it that you find hard, and what do you think would work when it comes to community engagement?
So just a small question then, right? Yeah, okay. I just want to pick up on something that Balki said, though, before I answer your question, because it links actually to some work that we're going to be doing after lunch. And Balki has set that up beautifully again, which is answering that question about what is it that we in this room as a collective, what is it that we want people to be doing, thinking, feeling as a response to any communication that we put out. So start thinking about that now, because that will help with the work, the group work that we do after lunch. In terms of working with communities and trying to sort of move communities along a pathway of change, the answer to that question is really how long is a piece of string? Because there is no one size that fits all, and it depends entirely on what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to achieve it with, and the triggers, barriers, facilitators, context, everything changes the moment you change those questions. So you could be talking about the people in this room and saying that I want to actually get everybody in this room to join together in a single voice, a single chorus around a single message around making FSM visible, and you would have a different set of triggers and barriers. Whereas if I suddenly said, look, I want everybody in this room to now get behind going out for a drink tonight, for example. Not that that's a social outcome, but, you know, and you'd have a different set of triggers and barriers to deal with. And I think that's really important for us to remember, is that human beings, all of us, think about how you respond to different things. And you have different issues that either get in the way or enable you to do something. So decision making is an incredibly individual sort of behavior, and yet it's hugely influenced by what people around you and people who are important to you think, feel, and do. So it's a really important one to kind of delve deeper into, to try and figure out, you know, we all know what the message is that we want to communicate. We know what we want to say. We know that we want to say that FSM is important. We know that there's a health issue. We know that there's, you know, an economic issue. We know that there's a shame issue. All of that. But what is it that's actually going to turn that message into communication, into a stimulus that's actually going to get you the response you want? Because you know what the response is that you want. If you just go out and tell somebody, you know, wear a condom, using Balki's example, because, you know, you're going to get HIV, that's not going to work. How do you create a stimulus that is going to get people to sit up and say, hang on a minute, I'm at risk. I am at risk. That's the key difference. I'll give you an example of how we've done that. And I know you said not mass media, but this is a 360 degree and it sort of goes across lots of different platforms. We did a campaign on birth spacing, on family planning. Basically getting people, couples, to make sure that they sort of kept a gap of 3 years between two children. Now, family planning communication in this country is as old as the hills. We've all seen Hum Do Hamare Do. We've all seen communication that talks about the Nirod upside down triangle. It's something that we're all really familiar with, so much so that it's become wallpaper. We don't notice it. We don't hear it. We don't engage with it. People are not thinking about it at all. So when we started thinking about how are we actually, from a communications point of view, going to get people to engage with the idea of a gap of 3 years between two children is important and is going to help you. A lot of the stuff that we heard from the experts was, oh, it's important for the health of the mother, it's important for the health of the baby, it's important for the health of the family. How many of you take decisions because it's healthy for you? I don't, right? And human beings don't. Health is such a faraway, intangible concept. It's such an intangible benefit. I don't know what it is to be healthy. I know what it is to be unhealthy. But being healthy is something that's very, very difficult to sort of give a form to. So instead of going down the this is going to be good for your health route, we decided to focus on something that was much closer to home. Something that was tangible, something that was real, something that was You could see in front of you something that you could put a shape and a form to. And we went down the route of economic benefit. And the fact that you have a gap of 3 years between two children means that actually you can make better use of the financial resources that you have as a family. And we came up with the insight of Faida, benefit. And we came up then with an idea about a mantra of benefit, a Faide ka mantra. Now here's where we layered the idea again, and all of you who grew up in India in the 80s are familiar with Madhuri Dixit's famous Ek Teen Do number. We put a little twist on that. And we said instead of Ek Do Teen, did I say Ek Teen Do? Sorry. Giving away the punchline. But instead of the Ek Do Teen number, we twisted that on its head and said Ek Teen Do. So you've got 1, 3, 2 rather than 1, 2, 3, because you've got a gap of 3 years between two children. Now that idea is something that can go across every single platform. So it was a television ad to start with, but it went on radio, it went outdoor, it went on interpersonal communication toolkits for frontline health workers to use with families. It went on mobile services that were reaching families directly in the home. We used it in street theater, we used it in listeners groups. We use that idea because it's a media agnostic idea. It's not something that's linked specifically to just one platform. You could use it in a number of different ways. And I think those are sort of lots of the different principles to think about when you're thinking about what is it that's going to work with this community? How do I make this content really impactful? How do I make sure I choose the right way to reach them? So what's the platform that I'm choosing to make sure that I get to them? And what's the way that I'm implementing this so that it actually does what it's supposed to do rather than takes you off in a different direction?
Thank you. Sameer, first of all, very basic, I just want to understand from you the statistics when it comes to the urban consumers. Are they like urban poor, not urban consumers, but urban poor, from a digital perspective, how connected they are, number one. Number two is the fact that we hear a lot from our partners, like how can we leverage digital communication when it comes to connecting with the urban poor? That's almost like the crying need. WhatsApp, is there a measurement for WhatsApp that's possible now? We know that our stakeholders are also connected on WhatsApp. Now, how can we leverage the digital platforms that are coming through for creating and mobilizing people? Yeah.
So, I mean, broadly the numbers are that there's roughly about 320 odd million people who use WhatsApp in India. So there's in urban areas, typically the density is a lot more because, obviously folks in urban cities use a lot more of their mobile phones and especially smartphones. Generally, I think when you look at sort of psychographics, an interesting sort of way to look at it is to look at sort of like a YouTube and a Facebook will be P2P communication or communication between consumers is the highest tier of adoption. So if you think about like making phone calls, sending text messages, any platform which is capable of doing that will have the highest adoption because it's basic communication. Entertainment comes in as the second tier. So your YouTube and your Facebook would be the second tier. And your third tier are sort of like more premium services which are a lot more verticalized. So think of sort of, platforms like WhatsApp to be like water and water and air. Everybody needs that when they're on their mobile phones, regardless of the quality of the device that they are on. Some might be on a low-end Android phone, others might be on a high-end, but that's sort of the base layer. So that's the base layer, and then after that, depending on, it's like Maslow's law of hierarchy, right? The more actualized you are is, very few of your urban poor will be Netflix consumers, but pretty much all of them will be WhatsApp consumers, and all of them will be using the application of the dialer on their phones. There is no easy way to measure WhatsApp. WhatsApp is like it's like dark matter. It exists everywhere, but you don't know how many people. It's probably the country's largest video platform, but very, very hard to understand how many people actually watch content in there. There are a lot of tools which have come on, which allow you to kind of build out lists of people where you can broadcast in mass. You can do that on your own phones, but generally WhatsApp groups are limited to about 250 people. And especially with the whole brouhaha with fake news, it's a lot more harder to to broadcast via WhatsApp today, predominantly because technology itself is evolving, and while this might be for a good purpose, most of the times it's used for basically culture hijacking. So right now it's a little bit harder to be able to kind of spend that time there. But generally what we tend to do, which I've seen, is that if you have a service which is offering value to the user on a day-to-day basis, it becomes a lot more easier for them to respect the phone number where that communication is coming from. The good news is that you spend a total of $0 or ₹0 to send messages to masses of people, which in the past would have cost you hundreds of thousands of rupees to send, whether it's via print or whether it's via TV. So the incremental cost of distribution is zero. The other thing which is there is that the most powerful thing you can get when you get is a person's phone number. Once you have their phone number, you'll be surprised at the level of data that you can get around that user. You can, and this is hard to get statistics on urban poor, but I'm just trying to say the basic toolkit which you need is once you have the individual's phone number, you can get a really detailed analysis of their consumption patterns, right from the kind of content they are watching, to the platforms they are on, to the psychographics, including how rich they are. But more importantly, you get direct access to wherever they live on the internet. A common sort of tool which is used on Facebook is this thing called audience lookalike. So you actually just put their phone numbers in, and Facebook will automatically, using the ad engine, get people who are similar to that audience demographic and give it to you as an ad group. And the fact of the matter is it's really cheap to reach these people if they are on Facebook. You could get them for a few ₹100. You could target a particular geography. If you get a sample set of say 50 or 100 numbers in your constituency, if you're working with them on sort of fecal flow, once you obviously crack the communication using all the insights and the ideas, the bigger problem is how do you actually get them onto these, how do you get these people to watch it? So even if you get like a sample size of 50 to 100 phone numbers, you can import them into Facebook, and Facebook would give you, audiences similar to them, and you could run your campaign and actually for a few hundreds of rupees, a few thousands of rupees, ensure that they get to watch it on their timeline if they happen to be on Facebook. Some of the cooler new tools which I see, which a lot of folks which use like platforms like ShareChat. They currently, when you open them up, if any of you guys have phones, just download the app. When you open up the app, it doesn't even have English as the starting language. It only has regional languages. And these happen to be platforms which are very sort of dominant, especially between tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns, of people from tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns and villages who happen to be in urban environments. Because culturally, Facebook and Instagram can sometimes scare people, especially most times scare people if they're coming in from rural backgrounds, because it's the rise of rich and famous, it's urban city hipsters who are using platforms like those. More Instagram and lesser Facebook. But if you look at platforms like ShareChat, they seem a lot more accessible to them. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they are growing really quickly, because it's first of all in the native tongue of the language that these audiences speak in. Secondly, the kind of content doesn't make them feel like they don't belong. It seems accessible. So these are good platforms to actually look at when you want to reach out to audiences, especially in high density, low income societies within urban environments. And if you get their phone numbers, it becomes much more easier to target them and have a relationship with them, whether it's via WhatsApp or whether it's via Facebook.
Thank you. That's extremely informative. Nitin, quickly moving on to you, I want to ask you, and this is a question that really comes from one of our partners. And here you're saying that, here you're saying that especially when it comes to PR or communications, which is around media advocacy, you have highly interconnected subjects, like you're talking about shit, you're talking about public health, you're talking about soil health, you're talking about food security, you're talking about manual scavenging. Now, how do you build a narrative which could be extremely relevant, and how do you communicate all the aspects that are related to fecal sludge management or urban sanitation or safe sanitation, and get it within the imagination here very clearly of our media folks and media fraternity. There is enough and more that's being written on Swachh Bharat mission, but pertaining to toilet building, right? Not necessarily around issues of treatment, around issues of sludge management.
Okay, I think get together in a room and thrash it out. I mean, honestly, I mean, that's the first start, is to distill down the problem. I mean, Balki and Priyanka both spoke about it. What is the problem? Why do you want to do this? And if you answer those questions, we do a workshop. And you will have to do a workshop to distill it down to exactly more simple messages rather than talking about fecal sludge management. That itself is a mouthful. So,
yeah.
So, sorry, just to answer your question, I think one of the big things you need is data. I think today data is, Sameer talked a lot about getting insights from different tools and stuff. I think a lot of our communication today doesn't use a lot of data. If we can mine good data and use data to tell really nice, emotionally led stories, I think that's one way of simplifying complex issues of, which you talked about, shit or manual scavenging or multiple issues to do with FSM. Simplified storytelling with using a lot of emotion and backed by a lot of data. So how does it contaminate soil, for example? What happens? I mean, we spoke about insights multiple times on HIV awareness or on the thing about family planning and stuff. So how do you create emotion in a story and use data backed up by data? That's the first thing. Second thing is, I think, how do you get your influencers to speak about it? Because
Voices.
Sorry?
Voices.
Voices, yeah. I mean, we've all spoken about different things, but nobody touched upon influencers. I think today, everybody, whether it's the rural poor, whether it's high density, low income people, they're all influenced by somebody. Yeah, there's a huge influencer outreach today, which communication professionals or PR professionals are doing today. Whether it's celebrities, yeah, whether it's influencers who are important for that group of people, absolutely important. So your KOLs, influencers, absolutely critical to bring these messages out.
Thank you. Now, celebrities you mentioned. So, Balki, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of what's the role of celebrities. There are times when we actually work a lot with the government across different communication, and there'll perpetually be a request of use of celebrity. How do you decide whether a celebrity is useful for any communication or not useful?
I feel like, for example, when Amitji was when Amitabh was used for polio right in the beginning, it was used actually, beautifully, because there was a difference. In fact, most people remember 2 drops of polio, 2 drops to eradicate polio. But actually, the tone and manner of that almost came across like that angry young man saying that one little thing. Come on, yeah, do it. So there was a bit of Amitabh Bachchan in it, which actually resonated quite beautifully with people. Like, enough of this shit, enough of speaking to you kindly, just do it. There was that feeling about that. So I think he was also used, his stature kind of helped in that thing, and also the tone of voice really helped in that particular campaign. The same thing with Akshay doing a lot of toilet campaigns, Akshay doing a lot of, social campaigns, only because he's now seen as a social star. He's doing a lot of things in mainstream entertainment like that. So it is all dependent on how relevant the celebrity is for that particular cause. And even if that celebrity is not relevant for the cause, it's all about how the celebrity is used. Because sometimes people feel that they use a celebrity, they can get away with saying anything. They can get away with saying, really boring things, and people are going to listen. No, actually a celebrity makes a boring message even more boring. Only because you expect something interesting out of a celebrity. And the moment you put boring things around him, it pulls it down a lot more than what it would otherwise. So it actually is really important when you use a celebrity to make it as interesting as possible, because the celebrity comes before the cause. It's the celebrity who's actually influencing the cause. So you need to make it very, very interesting for the cause to become very interesting when you use celebrity. So it becomes doubly more difficult with a celebrity actually. Not doubly more difficult, doubly more challenging, and doubly more rewarding. Because if you do it, the rewards are double. If you do it well. So that's where I see it as how celebrities can be used. And there are enough examples of this case, and both in brands and both in social stuff. If you may use celebrities and make them boring, gone were the days when people are waiting to see a celebrity on a screen of some sort, either on your phone or television or whatever. You see them everywhere today, so they're not so great when they just come across and deliver something boring. They have to keep doing something interesting.
Thank you.
I think I'll just add to that. I think, and you can't let the celebrity become bigger than the cause. That's also, we've seen many examples of where celebrities become bigger than the cause or the brand itself. That's.
So one question, and before I open this up to the audiences.
I just have a point of view on that one. I think in advertising, we've always been kind of told right from our beginning that the product is most important, the cause is most important, and nobody can. I disagree a little bit with Nitin in this one, only because I feel it's okay. Something becomes bigger than something. Something has to become bigger. It's such a what do you say, a fight for attention there today. Even if a celebrity in a particular cause outshines the cause, but stands out linked to the cause somewhere, the cause will get the interest today. The judgment of how we kind of the evaluation of communication has, I think, slightly changed in how it affects, because it affects in million ways.
Yeah, I don't know if many advertisers will actually agree with you, Balki, because
I wouldn't have agreed with myself a few years back, but I really think that any way is better than no way. It's not okay saying something and be satisfied you said it right. It's about just getting it there. If they say, hey, I loved Akshay saying something about that toilet, but I really loved Akshay in that particular ad saying something about toilet, doesn't matter the message. The toilet, Akshay gets a lot more prominence than anything else. That's half the battle done.
Yeah, thank you. So one question before I open this to the audiences. There is a question around sustainability of behaviors, right? Now, campaigns come, campaigns go. How do you sustain that behavior change? Because that, and taking on your example of SIF for that matter, it was interesting that you did that film and you did shoulder content around that. Now, how do you, so one is about, you can measure the impact and effectiveness of that campaign at that point in time. Now, what happened with those communities, right? And can you sustain interest in communities beyond the campaign? And
I think typically sustaining communication is about two challenges. Number one, is there anything new to say which will get them, or is there a new way to say the same thing? Because it can get boring sometimes just for the communicator. I've already, as creative, if you already said it, then if there's no new way to say it, or there's nothing new to say, then you can't expect, if you can't find yourself interesting, how you expect other audiences to find yourself interesting. Nobody wants to watch the same movie or the same plot over and over again. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is, even if you were to say it, will people watch it again? How would you actually get the same person to actually indulge in it again and to watch communication around it? I think broadly it's more, these are two what I would call as creative challenges. The second challenge is distribution, which is typically the cost involved. Now, the good part about the first two problems don't go away with digital, because you still need to, it's still a communication problem. It's still about sitting, like Nitin said, and figuring out.
But digital allows for communities to foster, right?
The second part, which is what digital allows, unlike traditional media, is that the incremental cost, like I already highlighted, is zero. So the good part is that it does something phenomenal, which no other medium could ever do, is that your cost of distribution globally is zero. Incrementally, it's zero. So from that perspective, if you actually find a larger purpose for the community, communities gather together around a couple of core pillars. Number one, they gather around an emotion. Either the community has felt something deeply and wants to actually make a change about it, and hence everybody is congregated virtually. And one can be slightly dystopic about that idea as well, because it's super easy to congregate on Facebook and on WhatsApp and then forget about it. We all have dead WhatsApp groups lying over there. But typically if people feel emotionally connected to something, that's always a good way to look at the sheer strength of the size of the community. The second way that people congregate is through a sense of identity, because you feel that this actually is articulating who I am as a person better than I can articulate, so I want to be a part of the group. And if you're able to kind of take your cause into, and the third way is that, information. This place is giving me information which makes me smarter, it makes me more capable, and it's a nice source of being able to expand my brain. So now out of these sort of three pillars, if you were to look at any of your co-communication, that it can expand into being an emotion that can congregate people, or it could be an identity or call to action that can congregate people, or it is a source of information that is going to be valid in their lives. If it's going to be about treating fecal flow, but how is that impacting my day-to-day? How is that, letting me know? The good part is that the medium allows you to do it for free. The bad part is that you need to be, on your toes, thinking creatively about why would these people want to be associated? Why would they want to talk to me? Why would they want to listen to me? So that challenge will always remain. But if you can kind of bring it into a sphere where any of these three pillars can act as a larger water cooler, then you have a reason to get their eyeballs and get their ears on a regular basis.
Thank you. I'm going to open up now to the audiences. Please feel free to ask questions and say your name, where you're from, and who's the question directed to.
Sorry about that. I think I didn't quite, just wanted to add that bit in there. Like for Amoli, what we did was, every 2 minutes there's a girl that gets kidnapped and forced into, prostitution. So things like those, which you can make memes around. And that's the beauty about the internet, is that you can actually create and take dense information and make it really succinct and put it out there. And so we use things like every 2 minutes, a girl is being abducted, while the time where you got up and, went to the washroom and came back, or every time you picked up, just made your coffee, at that point of time, there were these many girls which were being abducted. So I think things like those, which would not be possible in traditional media, you would not be able to kind of put a jingle out. You would not be, if there was something contextual which happened in print, if there was a rape case or there was something which was an abduction, you wouldn't be able to move that quickly in traditional. And that's what when you have a community which is decent sized, and if you have a good network of influencers, you can actually create that communication and get it distributed really rapidly.
The community feeds on its own, right?
Yes. And if they're emotionally congregated, if they're congregated via identity, they themselves will create content because they find it to be relevant.
Yes, we had a hand at the back here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Swapnil. So I work in urban slums, and I was very confused with this session. And the question is that, do we really care that community knows about fecal sludge management? So I'm living in an urban slum. I'm fighting with 100 different things. Why should I care about fecal sludge? There is an interesting book written by Sendil Malayanathan called Scarcity. And what he says is that if people don't know where their income will come from, where their water will come from, where they will go to the toilet, they will never think about long term, and no matter what messages you give them. And I'm thinking, so we try to sell health insurance to our communities, and it's a very difficult task to sell health insurance. And I'm thinking about whether fecal sludge management, do we really need to give them this message? Should our municipal commissioner and corporators be that audience? And second question is, Amitabh Bachchan has tried to sell this message about compost, Harit compost. How many people have actually adopted composting? Have we been able to change that behavior? How many of us sitting in this room actually segregate the waste or have stopped using plastic? Aren't we expecting too much from a community which lives in scarcity? That's it.
Thanks, Swapnil. Those are great questions. And the first question that you've asked, which is, are we expecting too much from somebody in an urban slum to care about FSM? And is that really what we should be focusing on? I think it's a question to turn back to each of us in the room and figure out why we think, if we do think that it's important, why do we think it's important? There's clearly a reason that this collaborative of 150 people works. And the collaborative works because, and I'm picking up from what Sameer just talked about, I mean, we're congregating because there's a passion, there's an emotion that's involved in, achieving FSM outcomes. We've got an identity, we're all WASH partners. We find that there's something that keeps us going, and clearly we feel that it's important enough to keep doing what we're doing. So how do we translate that into an audience whose lives are being impacted every day by the fact that there is fecal sludge matter, matter, not management, around them? How do we make this relevant to them? Then it becomes the communication challenge that you're posing to people. But is it actually important is a question I think that I'd ask this community of practice, really. I know it's important for me because, as Archana said, when you talked about, not thinking about FSM until you joined the Gates Foundation, it was the same thing. Until we started working on sanitation, and Madhu asked me, do you think about what happens when you flush the toilet? I hadn't ever thought about it. But the moment she asked me that question, it suddenly became really important to me to figure out where my shit was going, And I think it's something that people recognize instinctively as being something that you need to know about. You need to understand. People, I think, understand instinctively that fecal waste, fecal sludge is dangerous, is something that you do want to not have in contact. You don't want to be in contact with it. How do we build on that? And I think the opportunity is that there's been very little that we've done so far around FSM communication. So it is actually a greenfield space, and we really need to be thinking about how do we make the most of that opportunity.
Can I just add to that? I think part of the question was about involving the municipal corporation. And I think usually, and I didn't have the chance to touch upon that in the panel, but a lot of communication programs work really well as well if you tie up with some government institutions or authorities. So do it in partnership with them is also a great thing to do, by the way. To your last question on sustenance, it helps better sustenance and better enforcement of behavior change eventually if you do it with some authorities. We've done multiple programs with government involved. They like participation. They like private participation. It's just better.
Dr. Chari.
Yeah. So my name is Srinivas Chari from ASCII. So constitutionally, shit management is a responsibility of the government, particularly third tier of government. And whole communication narrative, I mean, the first part, yes, there is a joint responsibility of containment, but subsequently the whole FSM is about managing that is technically the responsibility of the government. If I take a video, like we saw the video, and if you ask municipal functionaries the same questions, even you will get much worse responses than what you got in the video asking citizens. So I think what are we doing about, we need a very specialized communication, what we call internal communication. Internal in the sense the stakeholders, citizens, but within the service delivery organizations, we need to have a package of communication. And I think this panel should be, and future panels and future communication strategies should be actually fixing that problem first. The behavior change will follow automatically. For example, metro, the behavior in Delhi metro is fairly decent because there is a sensible infrastructure in place, there's a sensible regulation in place, and then followed by behavior. If I don't have a sensible service delivery mechanism in place on the ground, and if you ask citizens to segregate, or if you want citizens to behave particular way, then I think there is a trust deficit. So my request to panel is also to start looking at, in the group work later, there should be a specialized group work on how do we communicate with service delivery organizations.
I think generally the challenge, Gene, I have with this is why should anybody care? In at the municipal corporation level, that person is an individual. So is the person who's defecating out in the open. unless and until this group is able to distill down why should that person care? Individually, everybody is a human being. Why does it matter to me? Why my fecal waste should be treated? How does it improve my life? With that knowledge, without that insight, without that data, you will not be able to get to the insight. Without that insight, you will not be able to get to an idea. Without the idea, you won't know how to communicate and how to communicate. So, whether it's the third tier of government or whether it's that person, defecating out in the open who doesn't care where it goes to, it really comes down to why does it matter and why they should care. And if that question is being able to be answered, everything will flow from there, no pun intended.
And a public opinion can get authorities to take action as well.
So I think, Dr. Chari, I completely agree with you when you say that, which comes first, getting service delivery in order, or then generating demand for that service delivery. And it's an age-old question that isn't just true for the sanitation sector. It's true for pretty much anything that we do, right? I don't think anybody's ever cracked that answer. And the way we address it, or the way we approach it, is that the two things have to go hand in hand. They have to go as slowly or as quickly with each other. There's no point raising demand for, segregating waste if there's no opportunities to, or there's no sort of supply side, system side work that's been done to actually make sure that that goes somewhere. Having said that, I think there are, even with, when you're thinking about FSTPs and you're thinking about what the challenges are that government might face in actually moving that technology along or that infrastructure along, there is a huge role that community plays in creating either barriers or triggers to that. So the whole thing around not in my backyard is a very community-driven barrier to getting technology going. So what are the different things that need to happen simultaneously? It has to be a systemic sort of view in terms of trying to move outcomes along.
Also, you spoke about the metro. I think that's part of sustenance for the metro. People are proud of the metro. Because I travel on it every day, I want to keep it clean. I don't think we'll see palm stains in the metro or a metro station. Unlike you. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So people are proud of it because they use it. And I think that's part of what Samir said. How do you sustain it, get people emotionally inclined to it?
We have one question at the back here.
Kavita from IHS. I just want to build upon what Professor Chari said and Priyanka, what you also just said. I think the two problems with sanitation as sector, which I personally feel, one is what was mentioned right in the beginning, that it's invisible, right? So how do you make invisible the visible? But the second problem is, I think there are so many stakeholders in this value chain. And like you said, it has to be done systematically, it has to be done simultaneously. But the problem is, I personally struggle that if somebody had to take a polio vaccine, they had to take it. If somebody had to change a behavior within the family, they had to do it and they would benefit of the results. Now the problem with sanitation is because it's a public good, you can't go to a community member or a person saying that you will build your toilet and you'll be safe, because that's just not true. Unless all these pieces move together, we are not going to see the public health benefits. So how do you deal with this dilemma whenever you're targeting any audience that you have to play a role, but hey, you have to hope that the others will also play their role?
Yeah. So, Kavita, thanks for that. We're actually going to address exactly that problem in the group work, because I don't have an answer to that question. I don't know if anybody else does. But I think we need to get collective brains working on how do we solve that problem, because that is an enormous barrier for sanitation, is the tragedy of commons. How are we going to find an insight that allows us to go beyond that or allows us to address that issue? I don't think any one person is going to have the answer to that question.
I think what the example Balki gave around the HIV thing about how does it impact you, the example you gave about polio, that I have to go and get a polio shot. So I'm sure there are ways and means to build a narrative around how does it impact you or me if it's not treated properly.
And this brings us to the close of the session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Balki, for joining us and the panelists. I just want to leave you with one thought before you clap. we realize that it's a complex issue. We realize the fact that we have to deal with stakeholders. We realize that there are supply side problems that have to be solved for. But at the same time, I would say demand is important. If demand was not important, all the marketers could actually place their products on the shelves and they would be picked up by us as consumers automatically, right? And especially it becomes really important because you're expecting a behavior from the consumer side as well. If government was solving for this problem, then we would only be solving for the supply side. You're wanting behaviors to be conducted by people themselves as well. And therefore, demand side communication would also be important. But we have a whole day on talking about how to deal with stakeholders on the government side as well as on the consumer side. So thank you so much, and thanks a lot, panelists, for making this a lively discussion. I've taken away a lot. Thanks.